and I'll give you a little introduction about her background, and then I'll turn it over to Sonia. Sonia is a photographer and visual artist. Her artistic practice adopts an interdisciplinary approach and revolves around interrelated themes concerning identity, memories of people and places, mortality, and gender. She uses photography to investigate, establish, and recreate social relationships through signs, symbols, and gestures. She graduated initially in philosophy at the University of Bologna, then from Bologna Academy of Fine Arts with a degree in painting, and finally graduating in law. So please join me in welcoming Sonia Lenzi. Yes, and we'll speak about the books afterwards. So we have great additions to talk about.
First of all, I want to thank Blue Sky for inviting me. I'm deeply honored to have the privilege to exhibit at Blue Sky. And thanks to the exhibition committee who selected my work, and to the staff for the great job done to help me to organize the exhibition. And thanks to you all for being here. I'm from Bologna, and I live in Italy, and I also spent a lot of time in London, at least before the pandemic. I started to photograph about 10 years ago. I have a background in fine art, in philosophy, and in law, and I work both with photography and in the communication and law field. I'm going to tell you something about my previous works before talking about Take Me to Live With You, the project I am exhibiting here, and they are all connected in a way. One of my first projects was called Ritratti dell'ultimo ritratto, Last Portraits, or just Last Portraits. It is about our identities as women and how we want to be represented and memorialized, and by whom. In Italy, we put a photograph on the tombstones. So I imagine another woman of the family had chosen the image that would represent another woman forever. Ideally, as the image is placed on the tombstone. I took the pictures of the portraits in 5 different Italian ancient cemeteries in Bologna, Milan, Genoa, Rome, and Naples. Then I wrote a text. The woman who chose the photograph said, "There are 25 images and texts and relationships and family ties represented. Daughters who say something about their mothers, sisters, friends, girlfriends, nieces, and so on. I often present this work in a performative way by asking other women to choose a relationship and read and interpret the text. This happens in public events. Women develop the narrative, I imagine, by adding something personal or a statement to the text. Then I realized a public art project about the massacre in Bologna's railway station in 1980. This work concerns a terrorist bombing occurred in Bologna at the end of the so-called Anni di Piombo, the years of lead, a period during which democracy in Italy was particularly in danger. The years of lead started at the end of the 60s with the first terrorist attack in Piazza Fontana in Milan. My monument to this massacre was placed by the main entrance of the new high-speed train station, where there is nothing to commemorate the massacre. It was a temporary installation from 31st July to initially 10th of August, then extended until 15th September. I believe that by identifying ourselves in a victim, we can understand that history better. So we have to be helped to understand. It is when a history with the main age becomes personal that we really feel for others. In Bologna on the 2nd of August 1980, 85 people were killed and 200 injured. I produced also what I called a portable monument in 85 copies, as the installation was not going to last. It contains the diary of the performative phase of the project, which took 9 mornings, and information about the terrorist bombing. So, how was this all started? I had to ask many authorizations, of course. First of all, to the Association of the Relatives of the Victims. I actually proposed a project plan. Then to the railway company. I prepared 85 cards, each one for each person who died, with information about the massacre and about the victim herself or himself. So my project is about death as well, not about who was injured and survived. It is a project about chance too, because if one wasn't there in the precise moment, he or she would still be alive. It is also important to make people understand how chance can play a role in our life. It was chance there again to be in Bologna on 2nd of August 1980, and chance again to be there when I realized the work in a period specular to the summer one. At the time, people were traveling to reach friends, relatives for the summer holidays, and I chose the period before Christmas holidays, that is psychologically and emotionally very similar. This is the invitation to an exhibition in Barcelona, Spain, where the portable monument, the photo book, was exhibited here. So what I did was to ask people waiting for the train in the same place where 35 years before the bomb exploded, if they wanted to identify themselves each with a victim of the opposite gender. I did this, as I said, because I believe that, as the philosopher Martha Nussbaum wrote in her essay, Not for Profit, Why Democracy Needs the Humanities, citizens cannot relate to the complex world around them by factual knowledge and logic alone. The third ability of the citizen, closely related to the first two, is what we can call the narrative imagination. This means the ability to think what it might be like to be in the shoes of a person different from oneself, to be an intelligent reader of that person's story, and to understand the emotions and wishes and desires that someone so placed might have. The cultivation of sympathy has been a key part of the best modern ideas of democratic education, both Western and non-Western nations. Each person who decided to choose a card and become a victim was immortalized in these pictures. If they would have been there at the time, they would have been dead. That is why I put in this kind of tombstones first the name, the surname and the age of the victim, then the name, the surname and the age of the person who became a victim. I brought up to date the victims in a way, and I made them living again. Individuals should be the fulcrum of political processes. Often their lives don't count or are considered worthless.
How many pictures did you take of each of these people?
More than one.
More than?
After this public artwork, I realized the work of my family house in Madognana, Hamlet between Bologna and Pistoia. Family archaeologists. It is an installation and a book. Home represents the autobiographical self, the picture that everybody builds of him or herself. Is the image that we establish and develop over time, a continuous reshaping of the past, which has either been lived in actuality or lived in the imagination through other stories or images. The absence of both people and objects that are no longer present in the house became in this world melancholic presences. Three parts have been juxtaposed in this project, breaking up a strict chronological order. Photographs taken now, vernacular or photographs found in the house, postcards, and two pocket diaries. The family home is above all the place of our origin, a place generations have passed through. It has been transformed with us by those of us who have been living and growing up on it. Then images of women and children who had been living in the house come in sequence. They may represent mother and daughter, as this relationship stands for us being born and for both itself, which we don't have memory of. The past has been blended to a recent present and vice versa, using places and objects of everyday life and through the research of traces of living memory on the walls or on the floors. In part one, an interior journey, a dream, has been created, mainly with new and old photographs. Then the other relationship represented is that of granddaughter, grandmother. In 2015, I proposed a project to the Archaeological Museum in Naples, Lares Familiares. Lares were household gods who brought luck and prosperity to the family. They were kept in a shrine by the entrance of the house or in another shrine in the kitchen area or inside the house. In the past, they were related to the cult of the dead because they brought offers to them. In one hand, they hold cornucopia, that was a kind of mark for wine before. I knew that the Archaeological Museum in Naples conserved many of them, and so I went there and I asked if I could photograph some of the ones that were kept in the storage room of the museum because maybe neglected, forgotten, or ruined. I chose 7 of them. Then I went to the city of Naples and I found a lot of shrines in the streets of the old town. Each of these shrines has a community or a family or a guardian who takes care of the memories of the neighborhood or of the family. Some of them contain memories and histories of pain and sufferance, such as memory of people killed by the Camorra, or memory of people who died very young. So what I did was to bring alive each different. There were 7 of them. They are transformed in a photographic object to the families and ask them to put the love that brings good luck into their shrine. These are the images of the temporary installation of my lares into those shrines. In the end, I designed and asked local artisans to make some shrines, 7 of them for the 7 stories. In each shrine, I put little objects and photographs related to each story or family. They gave those objects to me to photograph them or to keep them, or they pointed out details of the story that were important for them. In each shrine there is also a print found in an antiquity shop in Naples related to the shrine itself, and of course a picture of the lava. This is the installation at the Archaeological Museum in Naples, 7 triptychs. After the exhibition at the Archaeological Museum, I gave the lard to the communities of families who wanted to have the lard back. I gave them the lard that was first placed just temporarily as a temporary installation in their shrines and then in the museum, in the exhibition. I did this to create a bridge between these families and communities and the museum, and a bridge from the past to the present and the other way around. So to me, what is photography about? It is this question, but of course each of us constantly interrogate ourselves about this. It is certainly a kind of visual literature and a way we interpret, record and archive what we identify as relevant for us. It is a tool for reflection and a tool to involve other people in another dimension, as I did in It Could Have Been Me and in my Lares Familiares project. It can be about places, people, portraits, objects, but most of all it is about memory, curiosity, and the pleasure to investigate and to interrogate ourselves about what it is important for us, not just as individuals, but as part of a community. It is also about what we decide to preserve and memorialize. It is certainly to me a metaphor to communicate and interpret what it is outside ourselves. It's in Italian, of course, so the sound is off, if you want. believe, can also be about desires, as it is this project I'm showing here. I started with a desire and a question. Would you take me to live with you? When I was a child, I liked to build houses for fun and imagine living in them. I have always loved visiting the homes of others, not so much to see how people lived their daily lives, but in order to try and understand them better, and in my turn feel accepted by them, becoming part of their lives. Being close, or better still, living together with people who have a cultural, social, civic, or political values I share, values I believe should be passed on to future generations, is enriching. Some of the people I asked to take me to live with them were close to me. Some others weren't so much, but I would have liked them to be closer to me. Most of them were close to my father, who died in 2013, 2 years before I started this project in 2015. In their houses, I have been unconsciously looking for him, and I found a bit of him too. I compose in this way a social family album, recreating an idea of family through the materials and objects I found there. In the background, there is also a personal perspective on Italian history. It goes from the partisan movement to the fall of the first left-wing government in Italy with Romano Prodi in 1998, to the massacres perpetrated by the mafia in Capaci and Via D'Amelio in Palermo in 1992 in Sicily, through the feminist movement in the 70s. This whole has been conceived for a book too, because books are portable and are public, therefore are democratic, but they are also private objects that can be looked at in the intimacy of your home or taken with you in a park. So they are both political and personal. They are physical objects that can englobate a world, a narrative, through the sequence of images and sometimes text. Every detail is important. The cover of this book, for instance, is very simple. It is green, red and white as the Italian flag, though in a different shade. As this photo book is personal, and as I said, a partial vision of the last years of Italian history, linked with private memories. And papers are red because red is not just the color of the flag, but is the color of love, passion, and also sufferance. Then that particular shade of red is the Bolognese red, which you will find also in some of the pictures. This one. Red in Bologna has also a metaphorical meaning, as Bologna is regarded as the Red City, being run by the Communist Party and now Democratic Party since the end of World War II, except for an interlude which I also present in my photo book. And of course, it is a Catholic city, part of the Papal State for centuries. It is a book divided in chapters, or rather acts. You can see here on the walls blue sky. Each act dedicated to one of the 7 people I asked to be taken to live with. And you can find the same sequence in the beautiful Blue Sky book catalogue. They are, or were, the same age of my father, and they could be, anagraphically speaking, my real parents. Some of them are very well known in Italy, or in Bologna, and some are less known. I tried to concentrate in triptychs the essence of each person, the reason why they had been chosen. Mario was a partisan, and he was involved in Montesole massacre of families and civilians near Marzabotto, in the Bolognese Apennine. A massacre perpetuated by the Nazis during the Second World War, and he was also a painter and artist. Francesco is a singer and a songwriter and a writer, and he was already very popular in the 70s with his protest songs. Susanne is an artist and a feminist from Brooklyn who came in Italy in the 70s and decided to live and work there. She took part of the Rivolta Femminile, the main feminist and at the same time artist movement in Italy, founded by Carla Lonzi. Stephanie was from Baltimora and an activist for civil rights in USA and the first director of the Women's Center in New York, she used to say. She came to Italy in the 70s too and was involved in the feminist movement as an artist, although at the same time she would have liked to dedicate herself just to art, but her work was very political. She took part in the feminist art group Cooperativa del Beato Angelico. Giancarla is a teacher, writer, journalist, politician, former member of parliament and Italian intellectual. She is among the most representative figures of the Italian culture of non-violence and women's rights. Eugenio is an art historian and politician. He became superintendent of artistic and historical heritage for the districts of Parma and Piacenza in Emilia-Romagna. From 1970 to 1995, he was Councillor of Bologna for the left, then Councillor for Culture and twice Deputy Mayor. Giancarlo began his career in the judiciary in Turin as an investigating judge engaged in investigating terrorism, in particular on the Red Brigades. From 1986 to 1990, he was a member of the Superior Council of the Judiciary. He directed the Prosecutor's Office of Palermo from 1993 to 1999, from the capture to Torino to the major trials on the mafia and politics. He was Attorney General and then Chief Prosecutor at the Court of Appello of Turin. My father was a judge too, and very close to him. He was for equality and against all form of discriminations. He gave me many positive values, even though he didn't want to take me to live with him. With time, I came to realize that I had always been looking for a father and another house in which to live, where the atmosphere I thought I had lost could be part of it felt. In this work, my aim was to continue to share a life that, in reality, I had never been able to live, and to be able at the same time to pass on to others an inheritance in terms of values and everyday life that will soon be lost.
And do we have questions for Sonia? We'll take questions at this time. Sonia, I have one. So do you always do your projects bilingual? It seems like there's more emphasis on English than in Italian, but do you
Bilingual.
do exclusively?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
I was very moved by the narrative and the story and the whole project of those shrine pictures. And it was just, I wouldn't have ever been able to go the places that you went. I was just so taken by the way that you made it work. And it was just very impressive and moving how all of your ideas came together and you made them work in a very emotional kind of way. It was just a magical experience for me. And it was all just based on imagery, basically simple imagery of imagery, and how you made that flourish. It was very, very, very wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit more about the train station?
Yes.
How you, I was wondering how you selected the people to represent someone lost in the bombing, and what kind of reaction did you get from people? What did they tell you?
The reactions were very different. Each of one had different reactions. So that was very moving too, because some of them knew about the massacre, somebody didn't, especially young people. And so it was very also useful for them to know.
It seems to me that project and this one that you're showing here, one of the things that they have in common is this, how to say it, this desire to really go into another person's life and understand another person's life, but also ultimately the mystery of another person's life that we can never fully, we can try to bridge that gap. It's it's what I find also so moving about these projects is that I think that's a very universal desire and also mystery.
Yes.
How do we bridge those distances? But we want to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We would like to, but
Yes.
it is very difficult.
yes. But photography, I think, is perhaps uniquely powerful in working with that gap. I think.
Yes. It is the way we can live the lives of others,
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
with photography.
So seeing your pictures, I have a feeling that you are a very kind person. So you bring some light to the community and positive energy. You love to be and live with people, to build community around yourself. So your projects are very kind and very loving. So thank you.
Thanks to you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll just extend his comments, is that for me, there's a delicacy about these photos, the interior photo, and not a delicacy of fragility and shattering, but just sort of the way that these people live their lives and express themselves in their interior life in a democratic kind of way. But there's also a delicacy of sort of placement and weight and balance. I mean, it's an interesting, like photographs that will change your idea of a notion, and for me, delicacy comes up as a way to describe these. And I just think they're it tells you so much about the people that you tell us so much about. It just tells us something else, and I just capturing that notion.
Thank you again. Yes.
The pictures on the tombstones. Are they chosen by the person who died, or are they chosen by the survivors? That's a one-part question now.
The first one, the last portrait, do you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, the first one. No, it is, I imagined that another woman chose the picture to be put on the tombstone. So it's a fiction. I imagine that it was a woman.
And the second part is, if there were any pictures chosen by the person who had died, did you learn anything about how that person wanted to be depicted with a younger
Yeah.
image or a final image?
Yeah, this is another interesting question. So this is also something that I would like them to develop in the narratives they construct when I perform this work in public. Because it is interesting to know how we want to be memorialized and also by whom. Do we want another person to choose, or do we want to give to others an image of ourselves? This is not just on the tombstone, it's always, no?
Yeah. Yeah.
Great question.
Sonia, do you want me to talk about the books?
Ah, yes.
So you us some flip through with the Italian flag colors. So yeah, as a way to support the publication of this book, and Sonia, you can speak more to this, but she's made some special edition prints that are also, so these are for sale, and what you get if you purchase one of these is the lovely book with an essay. More of the images that you see here than in the exhibition, and some that you saw in her presentation. And then there's six different images that you created with the special edition, right?
Yes, with the special edition that it is here, blue sky,
And if you happen to
I live
purchase,
here, so
yeah.
but
And if you purchase while she's here, she will sign